This is Luke Paulson, the Catholic Conservative, and welcome to the news of the week for February 14th, 2026. And if you enjoy these videos, do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. Democrats versus the Trump King. Imagine being such an unhinged snowflake that you take a single clip from an unrelated video and freak out about it. That is what we experienced this past week, a parody of The Lion King that put various Democrats onto the heads of the animals, with President Trump being the mighty ruling lion, is apparently the worst thing that could ever exist. Let us be glad that President Trump did not do something truly horrific like threaten assassinations of his opponents, or hold up severed heads. Both would have been perfectly acceptable by Democrat standards. How many memes were created in the early 2000s comparing President George W. Bush to an ape? Hundreds? Maybe thousands? Yet, there are certain demographics that no one is allowed to make fun of. No one is even allowed to talk about certain statistics that are inconvenient, such as how certain demographics underperform in school. Now that is a bigger problem. But first, let me give you a history lesson. Kids become agitators. In the 1910s, Christians made the biggest mistake in a long time. They decided to hand over education from the church to the state. Granted, this was a long time coming. And it is related to how evolutionism started to replace science. Government schools get funds with almost no strings attached. These institutions trying to create revolutionaries is nothing new. However, walking out of class to participate in agitations over lawful arrests is. Schools with kids as young as 5 up through high school are being swept up. Although I cannot prove it, I strongly suspect that these kids were being told to participate or fail. As such, the participation level is high. The kid is either going to fail or be an agitator. One kid was already hit by a car, and what is to stop the teacher from leading her students right into the middle of an active investigation? This is not going to end well. Again, American schools are underperforming all over the place, and in places where they are most likely to object to these lawful arrests, scores are significantly lower than the national average. However, maybe with the war against fake news, fewer kids will grow up to become paid agitators, even if publications like the Washington Post need that outcome. Washington Post shutting down. Amazon paid $40 million for the Melania movie, and another $35 million in marketing for it. Now, why is that even remotely relevant to anyone? Well, Amazon is owned by Jeff Bezos, and he also owns the Washington Post. Some liberals are saying that instead of spending money on this movie, the money could have been used to rescue the Washington Post. I say that if the paper were read and respected, it would not need a bailout. The problem is that publications like the Washington Post have become so untrustworthy that no one wants to pay for them. It is the same reason that CNN Plus died. Maybe these so-called journalists can get some standards, and then they can go and work for a more reputable paper. Either way, I do not care. The less fake news that I have to debunk, the easier my job becomes. However, even if it is fake news, they still have a right to say it. The First Amendment is first for a reason. The Second Amendment is there in case the first does not work out. Canada steals guns. Before I begin, I must once again say, the Second Amendment saves lives. Canada has created a so-called voluntary buyback program for so-called assault weapons. We have seen that the Canadian government stole donations to truckers when said truckers objected to the overreaction to the China virus. Multiple provinces have said that they will not participate in this program. This leaves the job to be done entirely by the federal government. Now, what is the difference between states down here not working with immigration and customs enforcement, and provinces up there not helping gun grabbers? There is a big difference that the agitators and teachers from a moment ago do not seem to notice. Illegals broke in and are shielded from prosecution after harming life, liberty, or property. Lawful gun owners do not harm the life, liberty, or property of another. The criminals, such as those who infest Chicago and make these cities war zones, have the most restrictive gun laws. Liberty is the solution to so many problems. I wonder if Canadians tried to defund their police as well. Democrats have a severe problem with law and order, but they do put on performative compassion. Quoting a slave trader, the mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, like most Democrats and communists, officially does not believe in national borders. He then went on to quote the Quran concerning immigrants. I do not care what he quoted. The fact remains that not only was Muhammad a slave trader, Muslim nations do not treat foreigners very well. They continued to have slavery long after the civilized world abolished it, and even so, they kill anyone who will not convert. The Judeo-Christian worldview, however, is consistent. We believe that we should treat the foreigners and aliens with respect. But there is a caveat. Under God's law, foreigners are bound by his law. This means that any idols were smashed, and they had to obey the Sabbath in its entirety. Mom Donnie is culturally, historically, theologically, and politically ignorant of basic facts. The same thing applies to nearly all liberals, especially when it comes to virtue signaling. Mansion on sacred ground. Billie Eilish famously insisted that no one is illegal on stolen land. However, since the land was conquered, it was not stolen. Moving on, the Tongva tribe, by her logic, is the proper owner of her mansion. However, I would like to point out that the Democratic Party, except for John Fetterman, said that if you live somewhere long enough, you can kick the original owners off the land. It has been said time and time again that if it were not for double standards, liberals would have none. There are even reports that her mansion was built on their burial grounds. But I cannot confirm this. Now let us move from these small fish to something that makes Watergate look like a krill. A co-conspirator named. Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of trafficking girls. However, for a time, no one was convicted of receiving said trafficked girls. This meant that Jeffrey Epstein was guilty of trafficking said girls to no one. The Jeffrey Epstein Transparency Act mandated that all of the names of the criminals who worked with Epstein be released. Representative Thomas Massey noticed that the names of a few criminals were redacted throughout all of the documents. One name was Lex Wexner, one of the heads of Victoria's Secret. Take from that what you will. From what I can tell, Epstein trusted him among a few of these other men with his life. Now, while we wait to see if convictions will be made, even though the Federal Bureau of Investigation has known about Epstein's actions since 1996. For reference, Monica Lewinsky was in the Oval Office at the same time. There may be another conviction in the works. Director Kash Patel stated that there were no known co-conspirators when he got to the FBI. He testified as such before the House Judiciary Committee. What is most poignant about Lex Wexner is that it was an FBI document that revealed that he was known to be a co-conspirator. This means that either Director Patel perjured himself before Congress, or he is grossly incompetent. Give it your best guess. I, for one, am ashamed that President Trump has tried to sweep this under the rug. I, of course, want to believe that he was targeted by some very dangerous people. I spoke to someone who thought that President Trump convinced Marjorie Taylor Greene and others to take the fall, but I do not know for sure. This whole thing makes me sick to my stomach. I have no transition for this. Let us go on to the next story. Drones in El Paso. There was a major security threat over El Paso this week. The Mexican drug cartels released a swarm of drones. Fortunately, our military was ready and took them out. Beforehand, the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, planned to shut down the airport for 10 days. But said ban has since been lifted. This is what happens when the executive branch takes border security seriously. We do not wait for a Chinese spy balloon to trace across the whole country before shooting it down. Now enough with all of this serious news. I want to end this week by making fun of liberals and the imaginary problems that they fathom. Imaginary voter suppression. Democrats may have finally caught on to the fact that the vast majority of minorities do not have a problem getting a photo ID. However, because Democrats need to cheat to win elections by getting all of these illegals to vote, while simultaneously blaming imaginary Russia collusion, they needed to come up with another scare tactic. Their latest attempt is saying that under the SAVE Act, women cannot vote. This is because married women take their husband's last name, and this supposedly makes it difficult to prove who they are. If you wanted to be very nitpicky, this is a problem with registering to vote. However, the same paperwork that is used to get a driver's license can be used to register to vote. Now, because this is not Saudi Arabia, women can drive and vote. Therefore, there's no problem, but Democrats fear voter ID, because they realize that they cannot win without cheating. Now moving on from imaginary sexism, let us talk about imaginary racism. Black History Month is ridiculous.
Black History Month you find
Ridiculous.
why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
I normally do not listen to these so-called celebrities, but every once in a while, they finally say something intelligent. When I was a kid, Black History Month was a huge thing. Much like the made-up holiday Cinco de Mayo, but I digress. We celebrated by learning about what these men and women did. However, a lot of them were just people who accomplished great things. Irrespective of their melanin, people can accomplish great things no matter where they come from, given the opportunity. However, the same people celebrating this will not talk about certain statistics. These statistics kill the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There is, however, a certain word that is used to describe such moral degeneracy. However, because of my lack of melanin, I am not allowed to say such a word without getting cancelled. I'm sure you know what the word is. Now let us talk about something just as pointless. The Olympics and the overpaid athletes who participate. Was Vance booed? Vice President J.D. Vance attended the Winter Olympics in Milan, Italy. Now normally, I would not cover such an abysmally pointless international event. However, the Democrats decided to try something. A few liberals tried to get the attendees to boo the vice president at the opening ceremony. Then when it came to the opening ceremony, CBC reported that they heard a lot of booing. However, I watched the footage and did not hear any. I just heard cheers for the athletes. It seems that CBC just wanted the story to be true, and then jumped ahead of their script. The problem is that the pros did not care about politics. They were just getting their bread in circuses. In other news, the Seattle Seahawks won the Super Bowl, and I already stopped caring. That is because I do not spend all of my time on bread and circuses. However, I do care about the cultural insurrection. Vile halftime show. Bad Bunny, which has to be the worst name for a performer ever, performed at the Super Bowl in a foreign language and celebrated other countries while still in America. One reason that he had to perform in Spanish was so that no one would understand. This is so that he could sing about drug use and promiscuity without anyone noticing. However, while most of the white liberals who cheered him on did not understand him but still virtue signaled, people who speak Spanish translated the lyrics to his noise pollution. If these lyrics had been sung in English, the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, would already have fined the NFL. Now, I do not believe that this unconstitutional government agency should be able to do anything. However, the rules need to be applied equally.
Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but that is just my opinion. And do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. But before you go, on the left I have last week's video, but you may also enjoy the video on the right.